Beautiful. So I would love for you guys to share your experience of going through the eating meditation, insights you had, emotions, thoughts that were coming up as you went through the actual practice of eating in a mindful way. Any resistance, insights, what was easy, what was hard, and then also all of the content that we covered on eating meditation. You know, it's really a basic content. We don't have time, you know, to go deeper and deeper and deeper, but you get the context. You get the idea of what this practice is about. And then it's really, you know, putting detail, focusing on the detail, bringing yourself into the tiny little things of everything that you do and making everything that you do into a meditation. So I would love for you guys to share, and then any questions that you have.
For me, this one was a little more challenging because my mind really does just go everywhere when I'm eating. So I'm never really in the moment of doing that. And it really shows with doing this practice. So I want to practice this and be more in the moment with it and honor it, because really my mind is everywhere else when I'm eating. So that I'm not even really enjoying it. So I want to practice this more for sure. So really I would say that it almost is like when I'm eating, it's almost like anxiety because I'm thinking of like the future and what I'm going to do next, and just like constantly what's going next. So it almost creates a little bit of anxiety, I noticed. Like, hurry, be done, you know?
So you eat.
But it was nice eating the food like that. Yeah, yeah. It was nice. Yeah, in a way it was kind of like that. It didn't feel like anxiety in the body, but it kind of was, because it's the future thoughts, you know?
Yeah.
But chewing the food that much was awesome. And so towards the end of the bites with the chewing and just keep on chewing and chewing and chewing, then I could calm down a little bit and be in the moment. But then it was on to the next bite, you know, of doing that whole process over again. But I'm sure that will digest really well, you know, eating like that. So I need to slow down. That's what I got.
Good. What a great start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else?
Hi, this is Kathy. So I had a big salad for lunch, and I realized I overdressed my salad. I don't chew enough. My impulse is to eat quicker. I also did have a sweet afterwards, and it was so jarringly sweet, and it left the worst taste in my mouth afterwards, which I'd never noticed that before. But yeah, with my salad, I felt like I was noticing all of the wrong things. Not that they were wrong, but all of the things that were like that I overdressed my salad, or I didn't chew well enough, or you know, it felt very critical. I was being very critical of all of the things, and but yet at the same time, I'm glad that I noticed those things, because I hadn't noticed them before, and it got me thinking, okay, I can dial back, and because this isn't serving me. It didn't feel like it was serving me to overdress my salad, or to eat quickly, or to eat a sweet that just left me with a bad taste in my mouth. So I felt like it was critical, but yet it was a positive at the same time, if that makes any sense at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. So now the next time you can put those changes into place and then see how it feels.
Right, right. So I appreciated that. Yeah, I will do that for sure. I'm actually kind of curious to see how it will play out doing it again. It's an interesting thought to me of, oh, how would it be if I did this differently? So thanks.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Anybody else want to share?
I thought about what you said regarding like putting your intention into your food. So I like prepared my food today and I thought about those things like, you know, cooking something healthy and being able to absorb it and being grateful for my food and all of that. And then I guess basically putting love into it, like really taking in the smells of the food while it was cooking. And then usually I put cheese, but I didn't. I put less cheese this time and I put more vegetables instead, like, and just based off of our discussion from earlier. And then I felt usually I overeat. And so this time I actually didn't feel sick when I was like post eating, like I usually do. And the one thing that I noticed was I do eat really quickly. So while I was sitting there just like taking in my food, I realized that I still finished my meal in like 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. But I still felt like I could taste the peppers more. Like I can eat very spicy food, but I just had bell peppers in my food. And I actually thought they were spicy because I could actually like kind of take that in. But I guess one of the things I need to work on as well is like just eating a lot more slowly and limiting distractions. So like maybe looking at the wall while I'm eating versus like having a TV in front of me.
Mm,
Because then I'm going to feel like turning the TV on.
yeah. Or even instead of a wall, actually looking at the food that you're eating
Oh, yeah.
and taking the time to smell the food that you're eating and thinking about what it took for that food to be on that plate. And then the gratitude comes in and you enjoy every bite of the food even more.
Yeah, I could do that. There are a lot of improvements I could make.
Oh, it's an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
Me. I have made so much progress, since the first time I did a retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh and went through the experience of eating a meal, because they don't actually walk you through, everybody else is doing it, and you're sort of, the first time you're walking around looking at everyone, okay, what are they doing? How am I supposed to do it? You're trying to figure all of those things out, and it takes a while, for things to slowly start sinking in. My interpretation is what I'm giving you, in this 3 days. But I've come such a long way since 2004 when I did my very first retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh. But still, there are so many more areas of improvement, and so much more that I know I still could be doing. So I think it's a continual journey that never ends, and we just keep walking that journey with the hope that we're getting one step closer and one step closer to where we need to be. Bruce, Sandra.
Okay, I'll speak. So, um, I could have been, and especially after what you just said, and I could have been way more attentive. Um, I could have been sitting more in gratitude. Um, uh, I too tended to be distracted. Uh-oh, I came outside. I was distracted by my thoughts. So I would do the breathing and the eating, and then I would be distracted by the hummingbird or whatever, anything. And but what I did notice is I'm still very much in the programming of my parents' depression era, clean your plate. So I made a little bit too much and I put it all on my plate and I'm eating and I'm going, oh, I'm feeling full. And just, previous, I'd said, oh, I have heartburn, and my body said, hey, don't eat so much. But I did, I cleaned my plate. I mean, it's like, there's just a few more bites, go ahead. And it's like, I know. So like, no, I didn't have to do that really. I can get out of the program. But so that was interesting to observe. So yeah, I'll just say that I was under the influence of monkey mind for the most part. And so I get to work on that without a doubt.
And again, keeping a journal and coming back to the practice every single day. When you look back a month later, when you look back 2 months later, 6 months later, you will notice how much you've progressed. You'll notice that, oh, I used to do that and I'm not doing it anymore. Bruce.
Well, it made me more aware of how I rush through eating. Taking a bite of fruit and then manipulating it in my mouth is something I probably haven't done for, I don't know, decades. And I help someone asking, now what's the point of doing that? At least, I guess I'm not sure what the point is, but, and then I thought, well, this apple chunk doesn't have much flavor, and then I have this concept, and I'm not sure it's true. Oh, it'll have more flavor while I'm chewing it. That could be just my fabrication, and it could be part of the process of rushing through food.
It could also be whether it's organic or not.
Yeah.
And where you're buying the food. I have noticed that when we buy things that have been produced in masses over land that's over farmed,
yeah,
that food has a lot less flavor. For example, it's really hard for us to eat tomatoes. You guys say tomatoes. In the winter, when the growing season is done, because we grow, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've grown tomatoes in our vegetable patch, and we get an abundance of them, and we grow several varieties. And I do a lot of freezing because a lot of Indian curries have a tomato base. So I freeze for the whole year. We get so many tomatoes that I will freeze in freezer bags, anywhere between 12 and 20 freezer bags, so that I have enough for all my cooking through the year. And the tomatoes, when they're fresh, and they're organic, and we've grown them ourselves, and we know the nutrients that we're putting into the soil, they are the best tasting tomatoes, that when you go back to buying them from the store, even though it says organic, the stuff in the stores is just flavorless. It's nothing, you know. So with things like that, you know, so we've gradually made the decision to grow more and more of our own vegetables, because it isn't just the nutrients, it's also the flavor. But certainly with apples, you know, it may be a particular type of variety or where you're buying the apple from. So, you know, experiment. I mean, it's great to notice these little things, because then you say, oh, okay, well, that's not very flavorful. It probably is also lacking nutrients, you know, and then you might go try something else somewhere else and you'll find that there's actually a difference. And then that makes you want to make a different decision with where you buy from.
Yeah, this process and that thought of where you get it and how it's nourished reminds me to shop more often at, well, if I don't grow it myself, which I haven't done for years, you'll buy them from farmers market or farmers fruit and vegetable stands.
Georgina, do you want to share? I don't think you've shared yet.
That I noticed more of the color of the food. I noticed more of the texture of the food. Like you said, the smell of the food. And it just, I also noticed, like others have said, that I eat quite rapidly, especially if I feel like I am hungry. Like, oh man, I'm so hungry. Then I'll be like, so I don't know if I think that eating faster will assist me in being less hungry faster, or how that is. But I noticed once I noticed that, I'm like, oh, okay. So then I slowed down and I just noticed that the food tastes so much better as I slow down, because I'm actually tasting it in the moment rather than just filling this void or whatever I feel like I was filling in the moment. And it was a much better experience.
Did everybody get to share? Does anybody else want to share or have questions?
I haven't.
Yeah.
Well, as far as the blueberry goes, these were the last bunch of blueberries that I got at Whole Foods, the organic ones a couple days ago, have been really good. And I noticed that, but when I put one in my mouth and really bit down on it slowly instead of popping it in, it was like this explosion of flavor. It just like almost went nuclear. Like, it was so good. It's very unusual for a grocery store, anything, to do that. And I know what you're saying about tomatoes, because honestly, in Arkansas, they grow some of the best tomatoes I've ever had. And that's what I measure everything by. And but I won't buy tomatoes in grocery stores, even in the summer. I either will get them from a farmer's market, or if I need a tomato for something, like I made scrambled eggs and I used a plum tomato. That's about the only tomato I'll buy in a store. Or the little heirloom cherry tomatoes. They're usually pretty good. But no, we've been eating pretty clean for a long time. And when you do, you start noticing when food isn't that clean, that it leaves a weird taste in your mouth. I've noticed that with lettuce. You know, a lot of times the lettuce that's not organic, it leaves us, I'm going, oh, what is that taste? And you may not notice it at first when you make the switch, but once you've been eating different for a long time, when you do get something like that, it's just like, oh. Well, being sheltered in too, I had bought some Pacific Foods, which is organic. I bought like some soups and that, and I really don't like those either because there's something, even though they're organic, they've done something in them that's strange. So that was kind of a waste. But back to what others said about eating too fast, I'm guilty of that. Very guilty of eating too fast. But I think we all need reminders. And I think that's where it helps to hang around like-minded people.
Yeah.
And like you said, the whole learning thing, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of you are learning it a lot younger than I did. So you have a terrific time ahead of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, the vegetables and things for the most part, what I remember growing up were so much better. And it's these huge farms, industrial farming, and they've taken the flavor out of them. And Bruce, when you mentioned an apple, my experience with apples lately has been, I bought some Gala apples at Whole Foods. I used to think they were pretty good, but these weren't that good, even though they were organic. But I think that I got ruined because I found these pink Alice apples there that are just phenomenal. And so now none of the other apples taste good because these apples, they have the right amount of sweet, tart, they have the right amount of crunch, and I don't know, they're just delicious. And I learned years ago, we used to spend summers in Switzerland, and because I was married to a Swiss, and I would come back to the United States, and Mara, you may have noticed this, I don't know. And I would walk into a grocery store here, and I looked around and I went, oh my God, everything when you walk in is fake food. It's not even real. And I don't know if they have low fat, fat-free stuff in Europe now or not, but back then they didn't. And I realized that the reason people overeat and eat so much is because you don't get satiated from flavorless food. And when your food is full of flavor in that, it doesn't take a whole lot. So yeah, I've always been interested in food. Maybe I should have been a chef or something. I don't know. I don't care about cooking, but I've always been interested in the good side of food. So.
Or a food critic, Debbie.
Now that blueberry was a big explosion of flavor. It was unexpected.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, I have to slow down though, because I'm like everyone else. I just eat to get done a lot of times, even when it's good food. But I will tell you that a bite of roasted potato is not nearly as flavorful as a blueberry.
Well, thanks for the tip. I'll try the Lady Alice apple again. Thanks
Yeah,
for sharing.
they're called Pink Alice, and there's a pink lady, so
Yeah.
you don't get it confused. And the Pink Alice is something that I've only seen recently, so I don't know. And it's organic, but if you watch sales and things, you can buy things cheaper than you can in the grocery store. Once you learn what to look for in the sales and things like that. And if you learn to probably cook and eat what's seasonal too, because those are usually the good buys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. When we go into a grocery store, it's usually just the fresh section, maybe a little bit of the frozen, frozen peas or frozen corn. But that's usually, and maybe something from the bakery, a little bread. That's usually about it.
Yeah.
And then I go to the Indian grocery store and I get all my lentils and pulses and beans. Most of it, dried in stock. And that's basically what we cook with.
Yeah. I think most people here probably know that the best food is on the perimeters of the grocery store and not in the middle sections. And most of the time, I'm not real sure what's in the middle sections, unless I need some vegetarian broth or something to make a lentil soup or something. But yeah, we're just kind of shop the perimeters for years because that's where the fresh food is.
And that way you can avoid all the processed and all the junky stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do have a horrible sweet tooth.
I'll let you in on a little secret. I don't buy sugar anymore. The only time in the last, I want to say 6-7 years, I have bought sugar is when my parents come to visit. I know, because my mom just can't cook without sugar.
Oh, okay.
There are some things that she wants to make, desserts, and she refuses to use agave.
Oh.
That's my substitute. I don't use sugar. I don't buy sugar. In fact, right now in my home, there is no sugar. And it's been like that, I think the last little bit of sugar, the last time I bought sugar was 4 years ago when my parents were here visiting. And what got left because I didn't use it. And then when my parents came back, they were visiting in January of this year. My mom ended up using up that sugar, and then I refused to buy any more. And that was it. So we actually don't have sugar in our home.
Yeah.
But I always have agave.
Yeah.
May I make a contribution here? So for your mom, so xylitol and monk's fruit are very expensive, but they look and taste just like sugar. So if you get them and put them in the sugar bowl, she'll never know the difference. But they do cost considerably more than a package of sugar.
Yeah, I think she would notice, especially when I do buy sugar, it's not white sugar. I haven't used that in over 20 years.
Yeah, I haven't either.
I get the raw organic, the raw cane sugar if I have to. But, if I have a choice, the agave is what I will go for. And I have had a choice, so agave is what I have gone for many years.
Yeah.
But it is, I think it's taking one step after another. Kathy, you learned through your experience today that the little bit of sweet that you had was absolutely disgusting. Now that's left an imprint on you. How likely are you to go back and reach out for the sweet again?
Highly likely. Here's what I probably won't eat the same thing. I really enjoy sweets, and when I first was diagnosed with cancer a year and a half ago, I stopped eating sweets. Well, I pretty much stopped eating almost everything. And when I would try to eat my normal sweets, they tasted so bad to me that I didn't eat them for a really long time. And then when my appetite started coming back, probably about 5 months ago, I started eating sweets, a little bit of sweets, a little bit of sweets, a little bit of sweets, and they started tasting good to me again, which was strange. What I'd like to do is, this may sound contrary to what many here think or what you've been saying, but I enjoy having some sweets in my diet. And however, this is making me think that that my approach needs to change, to really have quality sweets, like to make them worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm not saying that for calorie counting or weight or anything. I'm saying for taste, for enjoyment, because to me, they are, having some sweets it's enjoyable to me, and I will take my joy where I can get it right now. And so I just feel like what I'd like to do is be a little more discriminating in what I do. It like, so what I had today was, I had some M&Ms. Not my first choice right now. Because they just didn't taste good. And I thought, I don't need that. What I would like is maybe, I don't know what, but just something that's more that I can enjoy.
Yeah.
And so the answer to your question is yes and no.
Yeah. I think there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of dessert, having a little bit of sweet something with your meal, at the end of your meal, but perhaps replacing the bad sweets that we know are bad for us with good sweets. So for example, if you baked a little cake, that used agave instead of sugar, and had healthy ingredients in it, then you don't feel bad about eating that sweet, and it might even taste even better.
Mm-hmm. I have, in all honesty, I have moved past the good and bad of it, because I've had eating disorder issues in the past, and with good foods and bad foods, and with all of that, those hang-ups, those types of things. And this health challenge that I've had has changed my perspective on that a little bit. And so for me, like I said, it's more, as opposed to a good or a bad, it's more of a, does this bring me joy? Is this enjoyable? Does this taste good?
Yeah.
Or am I just, shoving it in my mouth just to have it, or for whatever reason? And so if I decide, oh, I feel like eating a piece of cheesecake, then I want a good New York cheesecake with some good drizzle. I don't want to just have some frozen with something with frostbite on. Does that make any sense? It's just more of a quality issue for me at this point.
And that's what I do too, is a good quality and less of it. Yeah.
And this really brought it home today, because I paid attention to eating the M&Ms after I had my wonderful salad, albeit overdressed, but I had a wonderful salad with a variety of vegetables in it. And then I had that M&M, and I had to go brush my teeth afterwards. I was like, ooh, I just don't like this taste at all. So it really hit home for me. And I appreciated that.
Yeah. I have a question for others that do eat sweets. For me, I've noticed that when I do eat something sugary, I get this zing. I can feel my brain lighting up. And I read years ago that sugar lights up the same part of the brain that opium does. So when I get that zing, I think of that and I'm like, what am I doing to myself? Does anyone else get that kind of a feel like your brain just lit up like with a huge amount of pleasure with that first bite? I mean,
do.
yeah, I think sugar is an addiction.
I agree. I totally agree with you.
'Cause-
Um,
Yeah.
it has been for me. It has definitely been for me in the past. And that's why I work hard at not doing the good versus bad, because then I will get caught in that mindset of it. So now,
Yeah.
so I do get that zing.
Mhm.
However, it's because of the pleasure. It does light up the pleasure centers in your brain. It from what I've researched.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't think that's so bad.
Yeah.
So,
I
But
get
that's
the
what
zing
makes me
too.
overeat too, to keep going and not stop. And I think that once you leave the sugar alone, I know years ago, I went for years, and once you clean your body of it, you don't even want it. You don't even think twice about passing something in the bakery because you're not programmed that way. But then once you start eating it, then you start, oh, what's at the bakery on sale? You know?
that's been my experience too.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
I think you're
sugar is
absolutely
tricky.
right, Debbie. You know, I find that I can't do the sugar thing, or anything that has a lot of sugar in it. I can't. It just doesn't taste good to me. I've done clean eating for the most part. I have one weakness, which is potato chips. And I wholeheartedly admit that. But other than that, you know, for the most part, what we eat is pretty clean. And I cannot, my mouth doesn't like it, my taste buds don't like it. And if I have anything that is sugary after a certain time during the day, guaranteed I won't sleep very well that night. And so, you know, that sort of reinforces, you know, one thing I noticed going from being a vegetarian to being a vegan about 2 years ago is, you know, we had talked about taking that step, and then all of a sudden we said, let's just do it. So we went from being vegetarian one day to being completely vegan the next. And so a lot of things had to go from our diet. As lacto-vegetarians, you know, there was yogurt, cheese, and milk. Those were really the only things. But there are a lot of foods that are made up of yogurt, cheese. There's a lot of milk products. And all of a sudden, all these products had to go. And what was interesting was going back to a pizza place, you know, 6 months later, where we said, oh, you know what the heck, let's just try it out. You know, and going from absolutely loving that pizza place to going, you know, 6 months of being vegan, saying, this is so disgusting. How on earth did we ever eat this stuff? And it wasn't even to do with that it was cheese. It was just that it was so disgusting in taste and flavor. And you've gone from that clean eating to now taking back something that isn't completely clean eating. It has artificial stuff in it, to saying this just doesn't resonate anymore. So it's really interesting to take the steps, because as you do that, you know, and then to test yourself, to go back and test it, and then it reaffirms to you, oh no, you do not want to go back. And I think a lot of it is we're all on our own individual personal journey, so we do what we can do. It's understanding, you know, the goal or what this journey is about, and then practicing it the best that we can. with the notion that we're going to keep taking additional steps to move us forward. So we're not going to justify where we're at and say, you know, I'm going to keep eating this because this is all I can accomplish. It's always to push that boundary a little bit further. Sandra asked a really good question in the last video session, and it was about, you know, what about eating unfertilized eggs? Because we're talking about not just clean eating, we're talking about eating in a way that is conscious. Eating in a way that is minimizing violence and suffering to other beings. And I know there's a lot of debate around the whole concept of unfertilized eggs. I personally, my diet has never, I grew up as a lacto-vegetarian, so eggs were never part of my diet. And as a vegan, they certainly are not. You know, there is a lot of debate around, well, it's not a life form if it's unfertilized. However, I think the violence part comes in because as a mother, as a woman, how do you feel if somebody took your eggs? Or what could end up being your babies? And the chickens are really not given that option.
May I say something about that?
Yes.
Okay, so pardon me, Bruce, but till you get my age, you're releasing eggs all the time, and human beings and every animal, you know, releases eggs, and if they're not fertilized.
Yeah.
And so chickens do that too, and it's just that their eggs are edible. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think a lot of it is, you know, I want to say I practice live and let live. So I understand where we need to be, and anything that's off the flesh, in a way, even if it doesn't involve some form of violence, is disconnecting us, because it's a step away from clean eating. All living beings are organized in, you know, there are 1 sense beings, there are 2 sense beings, there are 3 sense beings. We have 5 senses. And the amount of suffering or pain that is experienced by a 1 sense organism is far less than a 5 sense organism, than a mammal. And so in terms of karma, from what I understand, when you harm a mammal, for example, compared to a vegetable, because even a vegetable has life in it, it's also a living thing, but the karma of harming an animal is much, much greater than, because in order to live, we still have to eat. And so if we're truly on this spiritual journey and on this spiritual path of purification and releasing, minimizing how much new karma we're binding to ourselves, and releasing what is there, what is old, then we need to take the steps towards more compassion and more love, so we can feel the oneness of all that there is, you know. And again, you know, I want to come back and say, I want to believe that, you know, live and let live. We're all, it's a very individual journey. So each of us gets to decide what we're okay with and what we're not okay with.
Can I add something too? So if we are going back to your when you mentioned earlier about the slaughterhouses and like the animals being killed and then the fear that they might feel, which would be transferred into their meat. So similarly with, I would think the same thing would happen with chickens, whether it's cage free or not, that there's some kind of fear that they might be releasing into their own eggs that could also be, or whatever, you know, whatever their energy is, which could also be transferred. Just based off of your example from earlier, I just thought maybe it would be the same thing, whether it's milk from a cow or eggs from a chicken. All of that energy would technically be transferred into what they're producing, and regardless of whether they're cage free or whatever great, I don't remember what what the cow one is. I would think that because they're still locked up and they still have limited space and they're not really being fed the right foods, they're still not going to have it's probably not the best thing to be eating.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, Sonali. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Well, you shared it earlier.
I just want to add my 2 cents about eggs. Yeah, cage free doesn't mean anything. And then you have the pasture eggs where the chickens really are out on pasture. But who knows when that'll be co-opted too by big business or factory farming. But even your cage-free eggs will come from factory farms. You can learn about pasture eggs. There's this farmer in Virginia. His name is Joel Salatin, Salatin. Yeah, you're familiar with him, Kathy? Yeah. And the way that he does his pasture eggs, it's really cute because the chicken coops and that, he moves the cows around the pasture, and then the chicken coop follows because they eat all the bugs in the cow manure and stuff. So it's just this whole kind of cute, holistic thing. I do buy pasture eggs in the grocery store, and there is a big difference in them, in the looks of them. You know, they do look, if you've ever had a farm fresh egg, pasture eggs do look more like a farm fresh egg. But boy, once you have one from the farm, again, it's like nothing can compare. It's just, and some of you could have backyard chickens. You know, I live in a townhouse. I can't have backyard chickens and raise eggs, but I don't think all eggs are fertilized either. In fact, you know, I used to see in the grocery stores, there'd be a small section where it said fertilized on the eggs, but I haven't even seen that lately. So I don't think that all the eggs are fertilized, unless you go, I don't know, Real Foods, I think may still have fertilized eggs as a choice, but most eggs aren't fertilized.
I think a lot of it is just deciding what you're okay with, how much you're wanting to give up, and how fast or how much progress you really want to make in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me personally, even if the chicken are roaming free, there is still the intention, and that's an energy.
Yeah, I see
That is the reason and the purpose for why they're there. And that intention itself carries violence with it. And as someone who is, that's the one thing that defines me, is the practice of ahimsa.
Mm-hmm.
And that means nonviolence.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to practice ahimsa, nonviolence, on every level that I possibly can. So for me, that's a no-no.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question though, Mira? So are you a member of the Jain, are you a Jain?
I am.
Okay, so it's, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Is it that the Jain religion believes in absolutely no harming, the ahimsa? And is it the Jain religion that, I remember seeing where some of the nuns would walk and they would brush this with a broom type of a thing so that they would not step on any little critters that might. Is that the right?
It is. Yeah, there are some differences between the lay community and the monks and nuns. The monks and nuns obviously have taken those vows to practice ahimsa to the maximum, which means that, you know, they are very, very careful to not hurt or harm or injure any living being, even as they walk. You know, they also wear a piece of cloth over their nose and mouth, because even when we breathe, each breath can harm and kill many microorganisms in the air. And so minimizing hurt and harm even in that way is very important to them. As a layperson, you know, we haven't, now I'll tell you, Sonali, who's on this call, is also a Jan. So you get two of us. But as a layperson, you know, we're not practicing it to that extreme. However, we do our very best to practice nonviolence on every level that we can. And food is such an important aspect of it. And then we go into other levels, you know, and we'll talk about this a lot more on day 3, because we have a whole section to cover about what it means to be really on the spiritual path. You know, if we are souls, we are consciousness, then every action, every thing that we do, everything that we think, everything that we say, every intention that we have is either positive or negative. And with our positive actions and thoughts and intentions and words, we may be releasing some of that karma that we bound to ourselves, to our souls. But with every action and everything that we do and say and think, if it's negative, we are binding more of those dust particles that we talked about this morning, more of that karmic energy to ourselves. And that then shows up as difficulties and struggles and problems in life. So if you want to release the difficulties and the problems, because, you know, the universe is all about balance and harmony. And if your actions are creating harm or injury to other beings, then of course that has to balance out. And so it's just a law of the universe that that's going to come back to you, and it's going to manifest, you know. I mean, at the microscopic level, think of it this way, you know, if we intentionally or even unintentionally, we harm a lot of microbes, maybe that's the reason our gut flora is out of balance. Right? And we struggle with gut issues because maybe that is how karma has to balance out. So this is why it's so important. We don't think of it from that perspective. We don't think of it that deeply. But everything needs to be balanced out in this universe. You know, even in Christianity, we say, do unto others what you would have them do unto you. Well, that's not just other human beings, it's also other living creatures. Life is just as precious to us as it is to all other beings. And so our learning to honor and respect all other beings is so important. And then violence itself is on, you know, we can create violence on so many levels. It's not just physical. A lot of what we've talked about today, because connected with food and eating, has been around physical violence. But we can injure and hurt and harm other beings through, we can injure, hurt, and harm them emotionally. We can injure, hurt, and harm them mentally, psychologically, and energetically. And so refraining from being so, mindfulness is really about being so awake and aware within yourself, and every thought, every action, every intention, every word, that you are creating the least impact in a negative way, you know, into the world around you. And that's really our goal, because, you know, no way can we, there are deeper and deeper steps. So even if you're awake at this level, you know that there are so many more steps that you can take to get to this level. And so it's a continual practice to better yourself, to walk down that path, so that you are living your life in such a way that the negative impact that you're putting out, which is like ripples across the universe, is so minimal. And the positive impact that you put out is much, much bigger than anything negative that you're creating in this universe. So, you know, so many people, you know, and I get really, that's one of my flaws that, you know, I have come to completely acknowledge, you know, that I have a lot of arrogance in my soul that says I'm holding everybody to a very high standard. And if they don't step up to that standard, oh my goodness, I'm so disappointed with that person, you know. And I'm having to acknowledge that within myself, because one of the things that's been arising in me is anger, because look at where we're at and why we are here, you know. And here's Mother Earth, who has created this to teach us a lesson, to give us a wake-up call. And then you've got all of these people who keep talking about, oh, we're awakening, you know, look, you know, we're going into the 5th dimension, you know. And then they do their meditation and they think that that's good, but they don't realize the other impact that they're having. So it's almost like, okay, you do a heart meditation and you feel more connected, but then is that really connection when you're eating animals, or when what you're putting out into the world, into the universe, actually goes against the principles of being connected and truly embracing the oneness? You know, so I'm sorry, but I had to work through some anger around that, you know, and say, okay, on the level of the mind, I understand that every person has their own journey, but I have felt angry that, you know, people don't put the two together, and understand what it means to be truly awake, what it means to be truly connected, what it means to be truly in that oneness. Because if you and I are one, I would never do anything, not physically, not emotionally, not mentally, not psychologically, not energetically, to hurt you or harm you. Because if I hurt you in any way at all, then I'm just hurting myself. We're just part of the one, right? This is so deep, you guys. I'll stop there.
No, it makes total sense, Mira. you know, and sometimes you just feel like you're swimming against the tide. Um, you know, I don't know anyone's mind that I have been able to influence or change in a good way. Um, I think that what you're talking about, because of the way that cultures have brought us up and taught us, it's easier to just, well, it's easier to take the easy way out rather than to make the effort. It's just like your work. It works if people do the work, but people want a quick fix. So they want a pill to fix it instead of really addressing the deeper issue. And, you know, I'm on that journey of trying to get out of wanting a quick fix. And it's I think that once you learn and change habits, you were talking about habits, I think that life becomes a lot more beautiful and a lot more easy than the other way that our culture has taught us.
Yeah.
You see how ridiculous and how convoluted it is. And sometimes I feel like you know, like a loner out here with that.
I'd like to add something too. So thank you for talking about karma, because when I think in terms of karma, it's more like, how am I with people, and not necessarily, well, and I treat animals well, and but I haven't thought as extensively as you're explaining, you know, that everything creates karma. And so I appreciate your bringing that to my attention. I took a pranic healing course from Stephen Coe, and he made a wonderful illustration with gestures. And he said, and I think we can apply it to our awakening. So he said, there's this truth, and there's this truth, and there's this truth. And so it probably is the same with awakening. You know, there's, yeah, I'm awakened. Oh, I can awaken some more, you know. And then, but we're all on that journey of awakening. And Debbie thought that she maybe doesn't have the influence she would like, but you never know. You never know, because I look at myself as a planter of seeds, and I can tell my sister something, you know, 5 times, and then a year later, 5 years later, she'll say, "Oh, guess what I discovered, and guess who told me that?" And I'm going, "I told you that 5 years ago," you know. So anyway, right? and so thank you, Mira, for planting seeds. I appreciate it. And all of you, all of us, I think that that's what we're doing.
These discussions,
Our awareness.
I think these discussions are so important. And this is what I think I came to realize by working through that anger that I had. As I worked through the anger, one of the things I realized was I was supposed to teach this. And that's part of the reason why I set up this class. And it wasn't just mindfulness, you know, because I've done mindfulness. It was a lot more than mindfulness. And it was, let's go much deeper and let's just share why we're on this path and where it is that we're supposed to be heading, so that we're not going down these side avenues of thinking, I'm awakening and I'm growing, but then, you know, we're clearing a little bit, but accumulating a lot of negative stuff. You know, we really want to at least balance out the positive and the negative impact, you know, and then start to live life where the positive is much, much greater than whatever negative impact that we're having on the universe. And that's when we really start to, you know, clean start to clear and clean some of that karma that we have.
May I add something? Thank you so much for mentioning about your anger, because I personally am really struggling with anger, also anger and resentment. And I recently had a wonderful discussion with a wise woman, Sandra, who she and I were talking about some of the things that are going on in the world, which is why this course of yours was so attractive to me, because of talking about peaceful living in troubled times, because I've been so troubled by what's been happening. And I kept thinking to myself, but I need to say things to people because we need to get rid of all the evil in the world. And some of the things I can't support some things that are being done because it's evil. And I'm feeling very angry about it. And then in speaking with Sandra, she pointed out to me that the people that I consider on the opposite side of where I'm coming from, maybe they also feel like they're trying to get rid of evil. We just have a different idea of what it is. And really, I'm beginning to see that it's the divisiveness between everyone that is that I'm most disturbed by, and I don't want to add to that anymore. And even though I might be on Facebook and somebody says something that I completely disagree with, or they support someone that I absolutely don't, by me going in and pointing that out to them is just furthering and adding to the division. And so I too am working with anger. I've over the last year and a half, I've wanted to let go of a lot of the anger and resentment that I have felt in my life. And frankly, because I don't want to die with all of that on my soul. And so in the meantime, I'm being angry about all of these other things that are happening. So this is so helpful to me, and having these conversations and hearing that other people might be struggling with similar issues is very helpful for me personally. And so again, even though I don't know exactly what your particular issues are, just the fact that you have said that you've had this anger really touched me and is helpful to me. So thank you.
Thank you. One of the breakthroughs I had by working through some of my anger was, okay, I have this knowledge, it's time I start sharing it. That's how I make an impact. And these conversations, this dialogue that we're that we're having right now, it helps us all. And it deepens our understanding. Day 3, Sandra very graciously has offered to take us through a process of something that she's created, which has stemmed from Ho'oponopono. Did I say that right? Sandra calls it radical forgiveness. And so she'll be taking us through that process. So Kathy, you'll have an opportunity to really go into that anger and perhaps process through it, release it, forgive it, or forgive whoever it is that needs to be forgiven. So I hope we can all move through some stuff.
So the Ho'oponopono will really and truly help you move through stuff. And it has helped me tremendously through the years. It's one of my favorite tools. So I hope you'll come and learn more about it and have an experience of it, because I will take you through processes.
How are we doing? Do we have any questions thus far on any of what we've covered so far today?
Well, maybe you'll get into covering it at some point, but you know, in these troubled times, as time goes on, I feel like I have more anger because people don't want to learn, they don't want to know. I always, if I see something and I don't know, even if it's a word, I don't know the definition, I go look it up. I want to know more. But how do we handle feeling angry or whatever at people who have just no interest at all in basically just trying to be a better person? I guess because I've always asked questions my whole life, I don't understand others who don't. You know, in fact, I probably stood up to a lot of authority. I grew up kind of like that in the 60s, like, you know, question everything. But I don't question science. But I might question someone's where they're coming from in order to try to understand it. But anyway, Mira, you're the real deal.
Well, thank you. That means a lot.
I keep, you know when people come back, I mean, I don't know anything, but I know when something goes on, when it feels right and it feels honest, it feels, I don't know how else to describe it. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe other people feel the same thing, that they can describe it in different words. It's a knowing. And yet I don't profess that I know anything. So
I think you know a lot more than you give yourself credit for, Debbie.
well, I might, but I don't think I could ever think that way. I always look at it that I don't know enough. I always say I know a little bit about everything and not a whole lot about anything, and just enough to get me in trouble.
I like that. I really like that. I think a lot of what you've been struggling with is very similar to what I've been struggling with. Being angry at people. I think for me, on the level of the mind, I know that you cannot, it's sort of like you take a horse to drinking water, but you cannot force them to drink. And people are like that. So we cannot change people. We have to give them the space to evolve at their own speed. And perhaps they'll never get to much in this lifetime, and that's the journey that they have chosen to take. And then somebody can wake up very quickly and go from a very low level of consciousness to a very high level of consciousness. So I think part of the problem is that we have judgments, right? I'm guilty of that. I have no right to judge other people, truly, to say, you know, why are these people talking about awakening and then they're not doing things that are in line to awakening? That's the bottom line. And I know that on the level of the mind, yet I have this anger that's arising inside of me. And so sitting with that anger and processing through it, you know, it obviously comes from a place that, you know, childhood, past lives, whatever you want to say, you know, but once you've sat with it and processed through it, released it, transformed it, then the insights come through. And my goal, I'm still working through it, through the anger, you know, but I'm much, much further. If you look back at some of the posts I was putting up on Facebook several weeks ago, they were pretty angry and judgmental. I probably lost a whole bunch of friends because of that, you know, but that's how I felt at that time. But it's been sort of, you know, acknowledging where I was at, acknowledging what I was feeling, you know. So within the quarantine, I had two things going on where I was practicing the presence, and I had a lot of peace and a lot of wonderful, you know, stuff going on in my life. But then there were these moments of, ooh, you know, anger that would arise with those thoughts of, you know, people, and they're so stupid, and look what they do, and, you know, how can they talk about awakening, you know, when they're not really behaving with integrity or with, you know, you can see that they're coming from a place of fear, and then they talk about awakening, and then they, you know, passing that fear to other people. It brought a lot of anger up. And then with the awareness, I've had to sit with it and work through it, process through it, you know. And of course, what came through, working through some of it, was, oh, I have some knowledge, I have some tools, I need to start sharing this, you know. And maybe that will actually help people to understand at a deeper level of what awakening is. And I am not saying that I have the whole picture, like Sandra said. Maybe, you know, okay, I've moved past this into this, but maybe there's another level here that I haven't reached, you know, that I haven't broken through. But at least I can use what I have to help those around me and those who are open to learning or understanding. And collectively, we move perhaps one step further, right? So I think, Debbie, you and I are in a way in a similar boat, and we just have to work through this. So I'm excited for Sandra's session on Monday, so that I have a chance as well to perhaps work through some of what I'm experiencing. And, you know, the goal will be to get to that place of forgiveness, forgive myself and forgive all those that I am angry at, so that I can break free of the anger. And then that's a breakthrough in consciousness. And then who knows, you know, what the new level we get to.
I wanted to share something as well. So I've experienced similar anger and judgment in my own life, and it's something I've also been working through. But something that's helped is, it's been humbling, is to realize, like, we all know we have our flaws, right? And what I guess what I'm saying is, just as there are people who maybe aren't at a certain level yet, I realize that I'm also not at a certain level. It's kind of relative, right? Like, there are people who are much better than me in all aspects. And even the ones that I'm angry at, they have qualities that they actually surpass me in. So those kinds of things have helped me to get over the anger much more quickly. And even regarding the pandemic, like, I used to be upset with people walking outside because I'm in healthcare, right? So I would be angry when I would see people walking outside. But now that I'm furloughed, I can't sit in my apartment all day. So I'm one of the people that I used to be angry at. So I mean, it's just like, it's hard to get over the anger, but I think that those kinds of things have maybe some of it's empathy too, is, or actually being in someone else's shoes for real. But yeah, and I've, just as you mentioned, like people going from a lower consciousness to a higher consciousness, like I've seen that happen in my life too. So it's just understanding that that potential exists in everyone to jump like that.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else want to say anything, or shall we move forward? Move forward? All right. So we are going to go into working meditation and then walking meditation. However, we're not actually going to do these. My goal is to work through them and for us to sort of lay some foundations or some background around what these are. And then you will use this evening to do those practices and take some notes, and then we'll sort of discuss them tomorrow. So we've done the breathing meditation, which many of us found very easy. And then we went a little deeper and we did eating meditation. And so many of us noticed that there was a little more resistance. It was a little harder to do that. Now we go even deeper. And we go even deeper and we look at how we can apply the practice of being present and mindfulness in every aspect of life. So let's look at working meditation. So now most of us, we can say, spend a lot of time at work. And some people will keep one job for the whole lifetime. So when we're spending so much time at work, a significant portion of our existence is wrapped up in work. And yet most of us have this feeling that somehow we need to get through our work to get to free time. I'm going to ask, how many of you are guilty of that? So pretty much everyone. One of the retreats that I attended with Thich Nhat Hanh, somebody in the audience, so now every retreat that he did would have a question and answer section. And people from the audience could come up and ask him a question, any question, and he would answer. So this was the question that somebody asked him at one of the retreats in the question and answer section. What do you do in your free time? So imagine you're sitting in the audience and Thich Nhat Hanh just got asked that question. That was me. And I thought in my head, wow, that's a great question. Yes, I want to know what he does in his free time. Well, that was little me, you know, thinking those thoughts, because his response was completely something I didn't expect. And he said, all time is free. Because he lives his life in such a way that for him, all time is free. And that's our goal, is to get to that place where all time is free. He then addressed the audience and he said, most of you suffer through the work that you're doing in order to get to free time. And then when we get to free time, we cover it up with alcohol and television and a lot of noise. So it becomes a disruption between me and myself, because it stops me from truly connecting with myself. But our goal is to treat all time as free. And we treat all time as free when we are not trying to get to something, which means we're not suffering through something. And when we are so present with whatever we have to do, whether it's cooking, it's cleaning, it's gardening, it's knitting, it's working, whatever, I mean, you know, chores, whether you're cleaning the kitchen, whether you're hoovering, whether you're in the garden doing your weeds, whether it is facilitating a class, it doesn't matter. The point is, when you're present in the moment, that moment is free. It's free of struggle. What we do is we create struggle in every moment that we are living in order to get to the moment where we have free time, that we consider to be free. And when we get there, we cover it up with all kinds of noise that really isn't free. So for someone like Thich Nhat Hanh, that's just part of living. To clean, to cook, to write a book, to teach a class, to sleep, to eat. Every moment is free because he's living in such a way that every moment is free. It's our perceptions that have to change. So when we change our perceptions from we are struggling to get to that free time so we can go on vacation, into every moment is free, and I live so fully in every moment. I am so awake and I am so alive in every moment, no matter what I'm doing. I change my story. And all the practices that we covered this morning, it's really that simple. It's all about bringing that depth of presence and awareness into every moment. When you cook your food, prepare it with love. Take your time, you don't have to rush. Take your time, prepare your food with love. And then you enjoy the moment. Just like Thich Nhat Hanh, he enjoys every moment. Of course, we all can do the same thing. Nobody has to suffer through certain moments. And it's just that change in perception. That is it. So tonight when you prepare your dinner, or if you have to hoover the home, go out into the garden, whatever it is that you have to do, just bring presence into the task. Just bring your awareness. Be in the moment and enjoy the moment for what it is. Allow yourself to feel free and to feel alive in that moment. It's that simple. So are we all good with that part of it? So I'm going to leave you guys to do that tonight. And we're going to move forward into the walking meditation part. For some reason, I think we've lost Sandra, but she's not coming. She's not asking to come back. So we'll just see. So, okay, let's go into the walking meditation. And I'm going to start with this little mindfulness set of lines that I have. And we're coming back to our breathing. So breathing in, I have arrived. Breathing out, I am home. Breathing in, I have arrived. Breathing out, I am home. Breathing in the here. Breathing out, in the now. So breathing in, I am solid. Breathing out, I am free. Breathing in the ultimate. Breathing out, I dwell. So very much like what we talked about this morning, perhaps going a little bit deeper, reaffirming, and you can do this in sitting breathing meditation. It's just affirmations, watching your breath in and out, and with the inhale and the exhale, you are just affirming to yourself, I have arrived, I am home. I am here in the now. I am solid, I am free. In the ultimate, I dwell. It's really that simple. And then in the walking meditation, so from that place of being so grounded and so solid, then you go on a walking meditation. And in a walking meditation, so let's just say a lot of people they go walking, hiking to connect with nature, but it's to unplug the mind, right? And all they do is they reach a basic level of relaxation. If you want to go deeper, you start from a place of already being grounded. And then you have an opportunity to go deeper in the walking meditation. And when you go deeper, the center of your focus is the experience of walking. And in the walking, we are extremely aware that we are walking. We are aware of our bodies and the movements that our bodies are making as we take each step. We have to be more aware of our surroundings. So it's not just the physical motions of us moving our bodies. We're also aware of our environment and what's going on around us. As we're walking, we do this automatic pilot because we are aware of what's in the environment, so we're not tripping over something or we're not bumping into something or someone. So we're doing all of that, but we're also listening. All of our five senses become heightened because we can smell and we can taste the air, and we're walking so we can feel our bodies move, and we're listening and we're seeing. We're seeing sights around us. We notice those things. We listen with our ears. Maybe there's bird song. Maybe there's a rustle in the leaves. We're listening. We're tasting the air. We're smelling different things. And of course, we're feeling our body move. And so walking meditation, as we do all of this and all five senses are heightened because we're paying attention. If you want to develop your intuition, start paying more attention to the five senses. Because as we do that, each of those senses will expand. So walking meditation helps us to ground by connecting with the earth and with nature and release the tensions from our body. And at the same time, we're beginning to become one with all that is. We become connected to the web of life, because nature is so relaxed and at ease. And as we connect with it and we observe it, we also relax into that ease and the flow. So we can start by just deeply inhaling and exhaling a few times as we release the tensions. And then we connect with the earth, we connect with nature, and we walk slowly. And as we walk slowly, we coordinate our steps with our breath, with our in-breath and our out-breath. So you can coordinate it so that on the inhale, you move your right foot forward. On the exhale, you move your left foot forward. And so you can do that. And it's a beautiful experience to walk like that, because then you're watching your breath, body and mind are aligned. You are grounded with the earth. Remember, the hands and the upper body is the receiver. And the lower part of the body and the feet in particular are where we release and where we give. So as we're walking on the earth, we're giving the earth energy. When mind and body are aligned, we become conductors. So we can give. And so we are focused on everything that's going on inside of us, and we're also focused and paying attention, aware of everything that is going on around us. So our senses are heightened because we're bringing deliberate, purposeful focus into them. Now, you can walk like that, and I would say that start out doing that, just that practice of connecting with the earth and just walking, then getting into a rhythm or a pattern where your breath is aligned with your walking, which step you're taking, which foot you're moving, and do that as a starter. However, if you want to go a little bit deeper, there is something else you can add to the practice of walking meditation. And in that process, what you do is you visualize that when you move your right foot, you put it down onto the ground, and as you do that, you kiss the earth. And then when you lift it up, a lotus flower comes up from the earth. Then it's the same thing with the left foot. As you put it down, you kiss the earth. And then as you lift it up, so it's usually left foot goes down, and then right foot will go down, and then one lifts up, and then the other will lift up. So as you lift up, a lotus flower grows onto the earth. And this is such a beautiful process to do, because we're not just connecting with the earth when we do this, we really are giving the earth a lot of love, a lot of compassion, a lot of beautiful positive energy. If you can go out this evening, it's just a beautiful day outside, and do a little of the walking meditation. Shalise, I know you're injured, and you've gone through surgery, so that may not be a possibility for you. But for the rest of you, if you can, or if you don't want to go for a walk, then maybe just walk around in your garden, or even around your home, and try doing that. Try doing that practice and then asking the same questions. What was easy? What was hard? What insights you had, what emotions came up, what thoughts came up, where was there any resistance? Just going through those questions and spending a little time to just answer them. And so I hope that what the the picture that you guys are getting from what we've covered today is how we take a really simple practice of sitting down and breathing, coming into the present moment, how we can take that practice into every facet of our life. So, for example, when I'm in the garden and I'm gardening, even though I'm digging up the weeds, I'm paying attention to the birds. I'm paying attention to the soil. I'm paying attention to the organisms that are moving in the soil. You know, one of my dogs will come over and he loves to kind of just get cuddled while I'm gardening. You know, I'm watching the things that are growing in my garden, you know, and I'm also paying attention of how I feel, what's going on inside of my body. So there's a bunch of things that are happening all at once, and it's about bringing all of your attention into all of those details. And that's when we become so connected with the web of life. There is no dissociation there. That is how we come into feeling the oneness of all life. Most of the time, remember, we're in our heads. And when we're in our heads, we're dissociated. We are not connected to life. And this really simple practice brings us into the now and helps us to connect with all that is. And of course, in that moment when you are so connected, you experience the wonder of life. You experience the magic that life is. And when you experience that, how can you feel anxiety? How can you feel depressed? How can you feel suicidal? Do you see that? Let's unmute you guys. It is really the simplest practice, but when we know how to practice it, it's so deep and it's so meaningful. It has the power to change us in so many ways and so deeply.
I have a question. So I always thought meditation was more about like focusing on something, but it seems here that if we're listening and watching and thinking about our breath and our feet and the lotus like all at once, that's not really possible. So you'd constantly be switching back between senses, right? Is that?
I think you do, you focus on what works for you. You don't need to do all of it. I think there comes a point where all of your senses are heightened because the practice and the habit has become so deep. I think, you know, when I look at Thich Nhat Hanh, he role modeled that so perfectly. If there was a living Buddha on this planet, it would be him. Because honestly, from the moment he walked into the room where he was presenting to the moment he walked out, you did not dare blink. Your eyes were fixed on him. You were mesmerized by this man because every action was so mindful. I don't know anyone who can get up and draw a perfect round circle on the board. And I mean a perfect round circle. Imagine the amount of mindfulness and awareness that it takes to get to that level. So if all you can do is just focus on your breath as you walk, Just focus on that. Don't try to do all of what I've said, because then we get into, I can't do this, I'm no good. You know, the self-critic starts to really show up. The idea is to start somewhere. And as that practice strengthens, it's going to become, the breath will become a habit, and then you can add another little piece in. And then that becomes easy as well, and you can add another little piece in, and it's just about expanding our awareness of the now into deeper and deeper levels. And as we go deeper and deeper, we become so connected to that web of life, the beauty and the miracle that life is, that there's no place for depression, there's no place for anxiety, there's no place for suicidal ideations, because we're so connected. We're so connected with what is. That's what this practice does. Coming back to another part of what you said, Sonali, you always thought that meditation was focusing on something. Mindfulness and meditation are two slightly different things. A lot of what we're covering today is mindfulness. I believe that mindfulness is a great way to start. Meditation is much more concentrated and much more focused. Most people are not ready for meditation. So we begin our practices with mindfulness. What we will go into tomorrow will start to move more towards meditation. But today, all of this is mindfulness, and mindfulness is just focus your attention, focus it on the present moment, into the now, go into as much detail that you can in the moment so you can enjoy the moment and whatever it is that you are doing in the moment. And being in that present moment with no judgment allows us to be so connected to life. It really is a beautiful teaching.
It is.
A number of years ago, I was taught a way to be present, present. And
Hey, I would
I'll vote for you.
thank you.
you.
Anyway, so everything we've done today up until now, it incorporated that, but in preparation for a meditation. And so I was taught to spend time just being aware of my physicality, you know, what it was like for my butt to be in the seat and every little itch, you know, or every little thing, you know, just observing it, observing what my body was feeling, you know, from head to toe. And after doing that, then allowing myself to taste, you know, what am I tasting? And then what am I smelling? But just one at a time, like you've had us do today. What am I hearing? And it's amazing what you are not aware of the sounds around you until you focus on every little sound that you're hearing. And then what am I seeing? And after doing that, you know, one by one, just one sense at a time, and having that much awareness and practicing with that one sense, and then adding another, and then another, and then another, that's how I came to have the ability to be mindful of all my senses at once. But I will admit, I don't hold it well. So I think the walking meditation is a wonderful opportunity to use all five senses. But, you know, as you already said, maybe just start with one and then add another and then another and let it go like that.
The more that you come into the present moment, the more aware you become. And then you get to a place where all your senses are heightened, and you're aware of the sounds and the smells and what you're seeing. You start to see things that you may not have normally seen. You hear things that, you know, usually you are disconnected from, or they just pass you by. That's what happens. And the more detail that you start capturing, it's amazing, because that's where you start to become more and more connected.
Sometimes I think when I've read this type of teaching before, and when I've read some of Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings, I've thought, how does one ever get anything done if one is thinking about every little minute thing that is being done, or focusing on the sense or this sense? And I thought, and every time I've ever heard Thich Nhat Hanh speak, he speaks so gently and so deliberately. That's my impression of it. And I thought, well, maybe that's what it looks like when you're so incredibly mindful of every single moment. That is what it looks like. And he obviously gets things done, so it doesn't preclude that by being mindful, because it has seemed very overwhelming to me when I have studied it before. I thought, I can't do that. I'll never get anything done. I can't take one step and lift it up and put one step and, like, you know.
With a lotus under your foot.
Yes, it just has seemed just too much. But the way you're describing it, though, I'm thinking it's more accessible. And then what Sandra said, you know, focusing on one thing at a time, it just feels a little bit more accessible to me today. So thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. I think when we are rushing through life, we are not really taking any aspect of life in. And when we're rushing through life, we frivolously throw away a lot of good energy. So when we slow down and we are a lot more mindful, we actually probably accomplish a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've noticed, you know, without wanting life to be crazy, sometimes my life is crazy. You know, I have a 16-year-old, and there's a lot of her school is a good half-hour drive from our home. So there's a lot of driving back and forth, you know, school drop-offs and pickups, and then extracurricular activities, you know, and sometimes middle of the day she'll call me up because she's forgotten something, or, you know, I've got to take her someplace else. So, you know, in the midst of all of that running around, not just, I mean, that's one example of where my runaround is. You know, I sometimes find myself rushing from one thing to another, and I lose that mindfulness. And it's like, okay, you know, this is how life is right now. But then within this quarantine, where I've had a chance to come back to the teachings, you know, and just be, it's been so beautiful. And I have so enjoyed the cooking. I have so enjoyed the cleaning and reorganizing my home. I've so enjoyed the garden. And it's such simple things. you know, but sometimes in the middle of the day, my husband's working from home, you know, in the middle of the day, we'll go outside and we'll sit under the gazebo, you know, and have a cup of tea or a drink together. And that's just been so nice because it's not rushed, it's not hurried. We have, and it's those moments that we feel so much more connected than we did because we're not rushing around. And so when we do take that moment, it's so much more meaningful. And I think it is about slowing life down. My hope is that when we come out of this pandemic, we've learned enough as a society to say that wasn't working. We want to reevaluate and reset so that we do move through life a little bit slower, more purposefully, where we have moments of much more connection with each other, when we're not living in this storm all the time. You know, a lot of my struggle has been that because I have all of these teachings and I want to be able to practice them all the time, you know, and yet as a parent with a high schooler and all these other commitments, sometimes it's just running. And, you know, I feel like, oh my goodness, this is not what I want to be living. So how are we doing? Does anybody else want to share any thoughts that they're having?
I have a thought. I remember when I was in your shoes, you know, back in the day. And so when you get to be my age and the children are grown and the grandchildren are at home, then you get to have a slow-paced life, you know. But until then, hey.
But I stuck with it.
Hey, that's why we have stages of life.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that even while you're running around, there's room for mindfulness, you know, like in the car. I know if I'm remembering to breathe, oh my gosh, my drive, no matter how frantic it may be, well, it's just when I'm breathing, it's not frantic. And the amazing thing is, I get to my destination on time if I do not allow myself to be frantic, but just do my breath work. I've always found that to be an amazing thing, but it works, that sort of thing. So we always have an opportunity to be mindful, always.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's my practices that keep me sane. Because I have the tools, I always know where to come back. And then the craziness continues. But again, the practice helps to come back. And that's what, for the most part, keeps me grounded and centered so that I, you know, actually can cope with the craziness without going insane.
Yeah.
Well, how are we doing?
Good. I was thinking about one of the weekend things that you did. You talked about flow. And after that, I became aware of, we may have talked about driving too and how it flows or, you know, maybe it doesn't or whatever, but I noticed that when I quit resisting it and just went with flow, everything went very smooth. Everything, there was no tension or stress or anything. And so what Sandra was saying, it kind of made me think of that flow.
Yeah.
When we're lifting our feet, are we trying to feel our feet, like the ground beneath our feet, like how our heel feels, how the ball, like all of that? Is that what we're doing too? Okay.
You can. That's a great practice of, you know, actually feeling how your body's moving and how your foot touches the ground, you know, and the different bones and structures in your foot and how they move. Because in a way, it actually helps us to appreciate our bodies. It helps us to appreciate our feet and how much our feet, our legs, our hands, our arms, different parts of our body, how much they do for us. And so, you know, in that practice of feeling how your feet move and how your body moves, you can certainly experience all of that.
I hope I'm not being intrusive, but I have found that sometimes what works for me in being the observer is saying, oh, Sandra's now, so I'm anticipating a walk in the park for my meditation. And it's like, oh, Sandra's foot is lifting now. And as she steps forward, she leaves behind a lotus. Look where it is under her foot. And now she's lifting her other foot. Oh, and her right arm is moving and her left arm. And now she has another little itch on her cheek, you know. And it just, to me, it's always been helpful to be the observer and in third person. Makes me neutral.
You suggest the walking meditation be done barefoot?
You can. When we walk barefoot on the ground, we are definitely more connected with the earth and the energy of the earth. Many of us have rubber soles on our shoes, and rubber is definitely a disconnector.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an opportunity and you can go walk bare feet, that is beautiful. Do it.
Okay.
Go walk in the grass rather than on the concrete and the roads.
Yeah.
That is even more grounding. Well, it's just after 4. I guess we covered a lot of stuff today, and we're finishing an hour early than I thought. But it's all good. I think you guys get the idea of this practice and how to start it very simply, but then take it to deeper and deeper levels and incorporate it into every facet of life and living. It's really about bringing your presence into everything, your awareness into everything that you're doing, so you can cherish life. So let's go do the practices this evening. We'll finish up now, and then we'll come back together 9 a.m. tomorrow, and we'll have our little discussion on our practices for tonight. And then we'll go into the practices for tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you, Mira. This has
Thank
been
you.
a great day.
Yeah.
Thank
You are
you.
so
Thank you, everyone.
welcome.
Thank you.
So
Yeah,
welcome.
thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Great evening, you guys. Bye.
Yes,
Bye.
yes.